Welcome to Marsh's Marina, where we are proud to be one of the longest standing Starcraft dealers, and we offer the full line of Starcraft fishing boats in stock. These boats are massive. They've got a reverse chine all the way to the back, a huge deep V, and we power each of our Starcraft boats with the most reliable ultimate four-stroke on the market, the Suzuki four-stroke.
All right, we are live. This is going to be our first panel of anglers, and we're actually going with an ice fishing panel is how we're starting it. And I actually wanted to call it ice fish, kind of a cool thing. But I'm going to tell you, like, the guys that we got lined up for you guys through the course of the next 4 days is going to blow you guys away. If you don't get a chance to get your questions in now, just keep sending them in even after to us, and we'll hopefully get them answered and get them to maybe do a little bit of get them to answer on, again, the Spring Fishing Boat Show website. So right now, what I do want to introduce is obviously I want to introduce Wil Wegman only because first, because Wil was the guy that's always taken the lead in this whole ice fishing component over the past 5 years. We've always had an ice fishing presentation seminar, and it was brought to you by Wil Wegman. But now we've actually brought 4 great anglers together to enhance it and make it that much greater, maybe a broader, covering different areas, because we got guys like Gord Pyzer that comes to you from the Kenora area, and Brent bringing a lot of science to the whole deal. Big Jim, you've heard him talk at all different expos and everything else, and he knows his stuff. And John Whyte, like, he's all over fish. Social media when it comes to talking about ice fishing and even just fishing Cinco in general. So, guys, I'm telling you, we got 4 qualified anglers that are coming your way right now. Victoria, you want to bring them up on the screen? And there you go. There's John Whyte, there's Wil Wegman, and Big Jim, and there's our friend Gord. So, guys, just real quick, we'll start with John because you're sitting there next to me. John, what would you say your strong points are when it comes to ice fishing, real quick in a roundabout way?
Being able to stay out every day. Time on the ice.
that's actually pretty good said, right? It is time on the ice, time on the water. That's you. That's your website, which is an excellent answer when it comes to that. So, and then moving, I got something on my screen I can't really see through. Okay, Wil, what's your specialties? What are we going to talk about today?
Well, hopefully we're gonna have a good discussion on ice safety to start. We'll begin that in a few minutes. But I've been involved with this game for a long time, so I like to think of myself as a good multi-species angler with experiences across Ontario. My home lake, like John Whyte's, is Lake Simcoe, so I have a fair bit of knowledge on that lake. But I also love to fish for brook trout and splake up in wilderness lakes in northern Ontario. So I love that as well. I got into ice fishing to stay sane, or somewhat sane, or pretend to, during the winter, and I've never looked back. And that's been over 30 years ago. So I spent a lot of time on the ice, and hopefully we can share some of our knowledge today with those that are in attendance.
Excellent. And obviously, Gord, to my left there in the bottom, tell us obviously your expertise.
Well, probably the strong point, Andy, is I've been on the ice for 4 months right now. We're going into our 4th month. These guys are just about to start. I grew up fishing Simcoe. It's funny. And I always opened the season on the Christmas holidays, driving with my parents and buddies out on Cook's Bay. And here we are in February, and there's barely ice. It just shows you how things have changed. But I've been on the ice. We're going into our 4th month right now. We've probably put 200 to 500 lake trout so far this winter. The perch fishing is absolutely incredible. And, I used to co-host the Fisherman Ice Guide series, and we broke a lot of the secrets about lipless crankbaits for walleyes. So I hope folks send in questions and ask about some of those outlier techniques that really haven't caught on yet, but are so hot across the rest of the ice belt.
And Big Jim from the Ottawa region and everywhere else in Ontario. Big.
Yeah, it's really funny. I thought I was a good ice fisherman. I was at a dealer show years and years and years and years ago. I feel old already, but I met this guy called Dave Gens, and he ended up coming up here. And 3 years in a row, Dave came up and spent an honest week with me fishing all over Eastern Ontario. And when you go fishing with Dave Gens for 3 weeks, you learn how to ice fish. It's just what it is, yeah. And it was a whole complete different game. When it was just when we learned about mobility and not having a wooden shack with 6 guys in a case, and a case of beer. Ice fishing has grown up. It's growing up. It's big time now. Guys go out there. They even travel to destinations now, and that's really cool. I know guys that actually now this year they're obviously not doing it so much, and shouldn't be. But guys this year that they would be traveling all to different places up into northern Quebec to ice fish. They're like true destinations, and that just shows how big ice fishing has become.
It's true. Okay, so just before I let you guys take this on the roll, folks, I just want to let you know that the goal of the Spring Fishing Boat Show has always been about education and opportunity to learn about new products. And a lot of new products will be educated through the commercials that the manufacturers have provided us with, as well as even the local businesses. And you'll see some of the commercials that are the actual people behind the scenes, whether they're in tackle stores or marinas. That's the actual people telling you how dedicated and devoted they are to the sports. But one thing I do want to emphasize in this particular seminar is we'll touch base on it, and Gord did, with the sense of the ice situation this year. Even though we've had some really cold weather the past week and a half, I'm not sure if that's enough. They're going to be the guys to tell you that, but really be careful and just pay attention to your surroundings when you're in the water, on the water. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you I'm leaving you in very trusted hands. Take it away, guys. Have a great show.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
So who's leading, Jim?
I think we're going to start with ice safety.
I could start with ice safety if Victoria wants to share my screen with everyone else, and we can follow along. I've got about 4 or 5 quick slides, and we can begin with a few ice safety messages. Does that sound all right to everyone?
Sounds good.
It does.
Victoria, if you can let me know when everyone can see it, I'll begin.
I can see it, Will.
You can see it.
Can you? Okay,
Yep.
good. So I'm assuming everyone can see it. Just a quick fun slide here, kind of emblematic of this year when we're seeing so many new people take to the ice. And for those that have never heard the ice cracking and coming alive, it can be enough to send people bonkers and running for shore. But it's a perfectly normal experience for ice anglers and for others who've been on the ice. As we look into ice safety, it can be everything from the real scary situations like we had way back in 1997 on Lake Simcoe at the north end when a 32-kilometer pressure crack opened wide up, and there were thousands that were stranded out on the ice. That same day, I was still fishing the bottom end of Lake Simcoe down in Cook's Bay. I had no clue what was going on. I had 2 feet of ice that I was drilling over, and I kept seeing all the orange rescue helicopters flying north. And I got home and had a phone call from my cousin in New Zealand who saw on CNN that Lake Simcoe had opened up and there were all kinds of ice anglers stranded, and she wanted to know if I was one of them. So she actually knew about what was going on Lake Simcoe before I did. But the good news is that all those folks were rescued, and there were no fatalities. And just a message that although we keep hearing about the perils and safety concerns regarding ice fishing, it is still one of the safest forms of winter recreation that you can have. More incidents occur on ski hills every year than every ice fishing destination in Ontario, and with a province that has over 250,000 lakes and people ice fishing all over the place, that's pretty remarkable. But most of the time, incidents can be prevented, and that's what it's all about. As usual, knowledge is key. So that's what we'll just cover quickly, the two, I think, most important things that ice anglers need to know is how thick the ice is. I mean, it's so simple, but there's a table that we'll show you in the next slide that that helps guide you and others that are venturing out on the ice. But just knowing that, for instance, walking out there on foot, you need those 4 inches of ice to keep you upright, and that not all ice is created equal. To know the hazards and respect ice conditions as they are evolving, and have some knowledge on what can happen out there and what areas to look out for is critical. And we'll talk about some of those in a few moments. But here's that table that I was telling you about, where 4 inches of clear blue ice is really the key if you are going out on foot, understanding that not all ice freezes uniformly, and you're not going to have 4 inches everywhere, even though you might drill in one hole. As the season wears on, that distance further out could be much thinner. So it's always good to check as you're going out if you're not familiar with ice conditions, and also realize that dark blue ice or clear ice or black ice, whatever you want to call it, it is the strongest and has the greatest integrity, but not all the time do you find it pure black ice. Often it's mixed with white ice, and that white ice forms when there's snow particles, when there's slush and other impurities that are mixing in during the freezing process, and it has half the strength of black ice. So if you found 8 inches, for instance, of white ice, then it would be the equivalent of 4 inches of black. Some of the other hazards to watch out for: any kind of moving water, so primarily river or creeks or drainage ditches that are emptying into the water body that you're fishing. That whole mouth area is one to watch out for. Bubblers, we don't see too many of them on Lake Simcoe, but you get into the Parry Sound and Muskoka region, and every other cottager likes to have a year or a winter bubbler system to keep the area in front of their precious $1 million cottage open, so that they don't have any ice damage. Later on in the season, we have new considerations like honeycombed or crystal ice. Those are ice conditions that are basically as a result of ice deteriorating from increased warm temperatures, and those are times when we just simply stay off. During the course of the winter, we often come across pressure cracks or ridges, and I'll show you some photos in a minute. But those are also areas that we need to practice extreme caution, practicing real due diligence when we're trying to cross them, sometimes realizing they can't be crossed, but just something to keep in mind. Some things also that we might not know, but snow acts as an insulating barrier. So the more snow you have on the ice, the greater chances are that it takes longer for that ice below to freeze. It also creates slush, something that is the bane of my existence when I'm fishing some of the wilderness lakes in northern Ontario, and I'm sure Gord feels the same way. At the start of the season, we already talked about how the thickest ice is usually near shore, and then it's thinner further out. But during the latter part of the winter, we have almost the exact opposite, where there's thinner ice conditions near shore, sometimes no ice whatsoever, and then out in the main lake you could still have 3 feet. So it varies. Ice is continually changing during the course of the winter. Some photos here, just a couple quick ones of pressure cracks on Lake Simcoe. You can see on the left a small ridge that is just starting to form. Sometimes these two main sheets of ice will pressurize against each other and just go jutting up into the air. I've seen them as high as 10 meters high. It's like a mini ice climbing mountain. Just phenomenal what ice can do. It can also open up, like you see on your right-hand side, to the point where it's just simply not safe to cross. Just some random photos here of vehicles going in and different ice conditions. more and more, that top left-hand corner, we're seeing instances like that on Lake Simcoe as access for those that are visiting the lake, and places to park is reduced year after year after year. People are taking more chances, and they're parking on what's technically Crown property, although it's ice, so they know that they can park there without being ticketed. But the result is often they park too close together, and the more vehicles that are parked, the greater the chances of instances like above, or worse. I've seen other shots where vehicles are right up over their almost to their windows, totally covered in ice at the end of the day, and they were high and dry in the morning. So something to be aware of. Some more quick photos here. Top left are what I call ice pies. So this is when the lake freezes up. Ice anglers often go out for a bit of early season action on a lake that is so large as Lake Simcoe. You know, it's the largest lake in southern Ontario, 722 kilometers, and it all freezes at different times. This shot here in the top left is down in Cook's Bay, where you know, you could have 5-6 inches of ice in the morning. A strong wind comes with the power of the open lake to the north, can totally take out the entire bay. And that's what happened here. 2 days later, it refroze, and Buddy walked out onto it. That ice never is as strong as one clear sheet of ice, but it's often covered with snow. So just an additional hazard to be aware of. You can see an instance there, the dudes in the small runabout boat going out from shore. This is early April on Lake Simcoe. They all have their floater suits on. They all have ice picks on. They're using that boat to paddle out to the 3.5 feet of ice that's out in the main lake. Half decent ice at that, but they're being extra safe, pulling that boat in behind them as a toboggan, as a double safety precaution. On Lake Simcoe, we see a lot of bombardiers to the left. So the ice hut operators utilize these to transport their clients back and forth to the hut. And we'll note in a minute, they're really the experts on the ice. They test the ice daily for their clients. They're not going to take any chances. So they're really the best ones to call. The two dudes sunbathing in the top and the bottom right there, I don't know what they're up to. They're just out to lunch, but just always takes all kinds. So these are just some really recent ice conditions on Lake Simcoe, as recent as earlier in the week, when the ninth line of Oro opened up, and just some drone shots that you can see. It's been a very interesting, almost volatile year on Lake Simcoe, with, as Gord mentioned, a very late ice back as late as early February, when a lot of us could start fishing, and that, even for Southern Ontario, is a late start to our ice fishing season. Some quick fundamentals. Don't call M&R, folks, for your latest ice fishing conditions or a safety report. They're not on the water every day. Their offices are often miles and miles away from the nearest lake or the lake that you want to access. So call a local ice hut operator or a bait shop for the latest conditions. Websites are a great tool, but know the source. And I've said this in all my ice fishing seminars, and not just because John Whyte's on the line this time, but his Lake Simcoe message board is one of the better ones that has verifiable ice safety reports, where John goes out, he tests the ice, he has a video of it, he shows how thick it is, he lets folks know exactly the time and day that he's out there and the exact location, because he knows that Lake Simcoe can have a foot of ice down in Cook's Bay, and Kempenfelt could have just a skim of ice and barely be enough to hold 2 or 3 inches of snow over top, let alone someone trying to get out there. So John is very responsible and gives those ice reports, and much better than someone just posting on some board saying, oh yeah, I walked out on 8 inches today. You don't know that dude from Adam, and it's better to make sure that you know of a trustworthy source. Checking satellite imagery is a new way for a lot of us to look at ice formations on different lakes as well, particularly larger ones like Simcoe. And then some of the nitty gritty. Tell someone where you're accessing. Let them know if you're fishing a small lake in Northern Ontario, for instance, where it is and how long you're going to be there. If you're fishing a large lake like Lake Simcoe, be specific as to the access location, where you're accessing the ice and where you plan on going during the course of the day, so that just in case, people know back home where you went. Wearing your ice picks. For me, folks, it's like wearing your seatbelt in your car. You hope you never have to rely on these things to save your life. I've gone through with and without them, and I can tell you I'll choose to go through with them, thank you very much, every single time, because it just makes it that much easier to get yourself up and out of the hole. I love these ones from HT, retractable picks, 12 bucks. And you've got some great assurance that if you ever do go through, it's going to be much easier to get out. Floater suits. A lot of people have the misconception that floater suits are like dry suits. They're going to keep you high and dry if you ever do go through. That's really false. I've gone through with floater suits, and they keep you buoyant. They're excellent for that, and that's their primary purpose, to keep you floating. But they still allow that icy cold water to seep through in a hurry. So just so that folks know that. But they're definitely a great safety tool, and I use a floater suit early and late in the season when I'm unfamiliar or don't trust ice conditions 100%. I'm wearing those floater suits then. When it's super cold out, my good, a polar HT polar ice suit is nice and warm, much warmer than any floater suit. Safety treads and cleats on your soles of your boots are important whenever there are glare ice conditions. Carrying such safety items as a cell phone, number one. Make sure that you keep it in your inside pocket, because we all know those batteries die in a hurry. Carry compass and GPS, because we've had the GPS fail on us, usually due to cold batteries or the battery dying. And I've been in the middle of Cooks Bay and other parts of Lake Simcoe when a snowstorm has hit, and have had to rely on a compass to find shore. You can't see your hand in front of your face, but that compass can guide you in the right direction. Other things like a lighter, flashlight, hand warmers, extra socks that I carry inside a couple of plastic shopping bags. An old trapper taught me that trick, and I carry those bags with me in case I ever put my foot in a hole, or worse, even go in. Even with dry socks on, if you put your feet back into wet boots, you're going to have wet, cold feet in no time. So I tie those bags over top of my socks, and that'll keep them warm and dry for the ride home. Almost wrapped up, but if you don't remember anything else that I've said in this talk so far, folks, then perhaps just pay attention here. Hopefully none of you are ever going to have to put this to practice. For my day job, I've been fortunate to have many, many years of on-ice safety training, taking this course over and over again. And I've been able to feel fairly certain that if I ever do go in, I'll be able to get out safely and quickly. So I'll just pass on some of the quick tips that I've learned from firsthand training. The number one rule is to stay calm. Easier said than done. Understand that you are going to hyperventilate to some extent, because that cold water is going to rush through you in no time, and it's going to scare the bejeebers out of you. That's perfectly normal. Accept that that will happen. And then physically or just verbally tell yourself, okay, dude, now calm down, turn around. I always tell folks that the worst part of going through is that your day is over of ice fishing before it even began. Turn around, head back the same way that you came. You know the ice is safe in that direction, and you're headed towards shore and home anyways. Grab your ice picks, and with those ice picks, what you want to do is almost act like you're a seal getting out of a hole. If you've ever watched how a seal climbs out of an ice hole, he does it beautifully, gracefully. You don't want to be graceful, but you want to put your body horizontal as opposed to vertical. Trying to hop out of a hole is extremely, extremely difficult, not only because of all your extra weight of your clothing, but because you're going to be exhausted, and it's way more work. get yourself horizontal, get those picks in front of you, and pull with all your might as you're kicking. That kicking motion can almost be enough to propel you forward and up and out of the hole. Once you get out of that hole, crawl away by dispersing your weight, and then get warm. When I first started taking these on-ice safety training courses over 20 years ago, they taught us to actually roll away from the hole because they figured that was distributing your weight better, but people got dizzy and they rolled right back in. So that kind of defeated the purpose. So just a few quick tips. I hope that most of you can keep that in mind. We're always looking to prevent anyone from going through, but if you ever do go through, know that you can get out. And one last tip, if for some reason you forgot your picks, make sure that they're always handy. But if you don't have them with you or you don't have any picks, you can still get out. You can see in front of me there that glare ice. The reason for the picks is to give you a grip. But I've learned that you can often put your elbows up on the ice and they're going to be wet and they'll freeze very quickly to that ice in front of you to give you some traction. And with your elbows gripping the ice in front of you, you'll be able to hopefully get those feet up and kick like mad, like you've never kicked before, to propel you up and out of the hole. So I think with that, we are going to finish it off, and Victoria can take my screen and stop sharing, and we will get into the presentation with the rest of the fellows here and take some questions from folks, and perhaps or pass it on to Gord. I understand he may have a little bit of a presentation, or we'll do questions, whatever you guys like.
If I can add to your ice safety segment there, we did a little experiment this year because the conditions were ideal for it. Right in front of my house, I have ice, of course, is Lake Simcoe, and close enough I had open water, and where we had very good black ice, or blue ice as you call it, early in the month of January, and we had so many days of this perfect glass ice with no snow on it, and then open water a couple of 100 yards away. So it snowed after a couple of days of ice making, and for 8 days we checked the progression of the ice. The early ice that had the snow on top of it, and then the open ice where there was open water and no snow. So we checked it every day for 8 days. And it looked like after the 8th day, we had more than 6 inches of perfect black ice where it was open water, but we only had 4 1/4 inches of ice with less than 3 inches of light snow on top of it. And so it was a pretty good experiment to show that the insulating power of snow. And that I think all the results of that are still up on Facebook on my page there. And there's some videos and pictures of all the measurements every morning and everything. But it was interesting to find out that just 2.5 to 3 inches of very light snow on perfect ice could almost completely stop the growth.
That's cool. Hey, John, I spoke with a buddy of mine who's used to teach winter safety in the armed forces. He's retired now and loves to ice fish. Yep. And I asked him about the snow and the freezing factor of snow. And he said when they used to teach it, they taught people that it was roughly R1 per inch of snow.
Okay.
For your insulation factor. Yeah, he said that's what they had, like they did testing for years, and he said just a ballpark, because there's snow that's really heavy, there's light fluffy snow, stuff like that, but he said it was about an R1, so it's R12 is 12 inches of snow.
Yeah,
that starts to become a factor.
It does. I mean, we're making ice from the bottom up once we've got perfect flat clear ice, and so if you can't get those freezing nights to penetrate, then you're not making any ice. But I found it was pretty interesting. It was much slower growth than I thought it would be. We had some nights that were almost -20, and we made 1/4 inch of ice. On 3 inches. Yeah. So
yeah, you think it would be a lot. One more thing, and I'll let Gord go. I just wanted to mention Will, you talked about ice picks.
Yes,
They don't
indeed.
belong. They don't belong in your bag. They
No.
belong around your neck. Because when you fall through, you got to get back out to get your bag to get them. Then you have to jump back in and use them to get out. Like you can make a joke about it. So many people have these things, and you don't have to worry about it with the HT ones. They have the retractable. You can see the way they come down here and the points come out into the ice when you dig them in the ice. So you pound them in the ice hard, but you gotta have them around your neck. Doesn't do any good to have them in your ice fishing bag or in your sleigh you're pulling or whatever. You gotta have them there.
Absolutely, Jim. It's like having your life jacket or a PFD stuck underneath your storage compartments with a whole bunch of junk on it just when you really need it.
Yeah, I've got those things there. I've got them everywhere. Every ice fishing bag I have, every HD rod coat, everywhere I've got a pair. You got to have them.
Yeah. I think, guys, we should get into ice fishing questions, but I'll add one more thing to the safety. There's it's called a nebulous. And believe it or not, in the U.S., in Connecticut, Wisconsin, many of the lakes, you're not allowed to go on the lake unless you have a nebulous with you. And they just flip into the back of your snow machine or your quad. And it's a PFD, if you will. It'll float a snow machine. And one pull of the handle, and it inflates into a 2-man raft. And we all carry them in our snow machines and quads. It's the slickest thing. Now they're a little pricey. I think they're, $300-400. They last forever. And if you amortize $200 or $300 or $400 over the next 20-30 years, and it saves your life once, it was well worth it. I should not admit this. I have gone through the ice 3 times.
Whoa.
That's
it
all?
happens, Gord.
That's all.
And we won't talk about it.
You mean this year?
You don't need ice from the fridge, John.
Oh, okay. I went through twice last year.
For us.
Okay, Gord, you're away.
Well, I was hoping Victoria might have some questions for us.
Oh.
I know folks listening in, and I mean, we can all talk, but I'd rather answer questions if folks had them.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Sounds good. Hey, Gord, what I'll do while we're waiting to get some questions is I'll talk about one of your secrets, as I was telling you yesterday. Which one? Yeah. Oh, no, this is another one.
Oh.
I'll have that one. A long time ago, I'm a huge fan of jigging wraps, but a long time ago, Gord taught me something, and it was to put a feather on the front hook of a jigging wrap. And you can see the way this is on there. If I can get it close enough. See the way you got to bend the front hook down? I get it on something light so you can see it. See the way the front hook's bent down? You got to be careful, though. You got to do it really slowly with rounded pliers because it gets expensive when you start breaking the front hooks off, and you got to try 60 before you get one. But man, the number of times that I have caught fish with these, and I'm talking walleyes, lake trout, even whitefish, all kinds of fish on them. Some big crappies too, even when you're not looking for them. And they're only on the feathered hook. Only on the feathered hook. And it's really funny because a buddy of mine, Dave Chong, everybody knows Dave, he's a freak for attaching feathers to topwaters. And I probably make them 20 a year, 30 a year. They get chewed up. There's something about a lure sitting there and feathers on it. I don't know what it is, but I see Gord nodding. They come to it. But that's one of the things that Gord taught me, and he said to me he wished he had never put it out there because he goes fishing with guys now when they catch bigger fish than him. So,
and the other thing, Jim, you can scale that. You can scale your treble, correct? Like if you've got a small jigging wrap or a larger, you scale and you make them stronger. You can make them with feathers. I'll tell you a real secret. I make mine with polar bear hair, and it just glistens underneath. And the really cool thing is, though, what I always say is the jigging wrap in that situation and the top water lure in the summertime, our baits are the delivery mechanism for that feather. That's all the bait is. It's a delivery mechanism for the feather, and the feather is the killer.
Any
Okay, so
questions
we
for
had a
her?
couple of questions that came in. You can ask questions through Instagram, Facebook, and some people are even emailing them over to us. So we have a couple that came in just now. One question is, what's your favorite fish to catch through the ice?
Oh, there's a good one.
I'll tell you what mine is. My favorite fish to catch through the ice is it's a toss up between, believe it or not, at the one end of the scale crappies and the other end of the scale lake trout. But if I had to pick one, no question about it, it would be Lakers. Lakers are cold water fish. They're super aggressive. They love the winter time. They will chase you. They grow big. Our biggest is about 32, 34 pounds. My grandson caught that perch fishing on 6-pound test line. We could barely get it through the hole in the ice. And when it popped through, its head went like that. It was about 32, 34 pounds, but they chase you, they fight you. It's slam bam, thank you, ma'am.
That would be mine too. On the top end, definitely lake trout, and on the bottom end, perch.
You must live beside Simcoe.
Yeah, I think
Even-
I've got to agree.
That's funny
with
because, of course, that changed when I was on Georgian Bay for 35 years. Of course, then it was pike and walleye, but
yeah.
Simcoe, there's
Whatever's close.
Good.
I gotta say it. I love fishing. You know, like I love fishing for crappies and lake trout through the ice too. Up until the last few years, I used to get out on Quinny a lot. Nothing beats going down and banging up a half a dozen walleyes in Quinny, and you know there's a chance you're going to get a 25, 28-inch fish, maybe even bigger if you're lucky. I do that. But if I had to pick one thing to fish through the ice for the rest of my life, it would be bluegills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Interesting.
They just really, I just love them. I love them. I got my 3-pound test micro ice, little wimpy little rods, and all that stuff. But it's just, man, I get excited when I see the fish. And you'll even learn over the years. This is something that Dave taught me. I've watched them so often. And I'm sure it's pretty well true in most natural lakes, is that those crappies want to show in about 12 feet at sundown, and down below it in 18, 20, 22, you see this other horde of fish that like you see them on the flasher plain as day, and that's the bluegills and pumpkin seeds sometimes mixed, and hybrids too. That's something a lot of people don't realize when they have a hard time looking at a bluegill or a pumpkin seed, and the ones that have a little more of a bar to them. There's they're hybrids, so the bluegills and the pumpkin seeds are messing around on Saturday night, I guess. But I love them. It's fun to catch.
I think.
What about you, Willie?
Well, yeah, by default, I guess it would have to be, perch on the small end and Lakers on the large. But the perch come with a big caveat because I'm so spoiled on Lake Simcoe. Perhaps one of the best trophy perch lakes in North America. I remember In Fisherman at one time called it the last remaining trophy perch lake in North America, where so many fish over 13, 14 inches reside. So we're somewhat spoiled. We don't have the same quality fishery, I don't think anyways, that we have back then. And it's weird, I've come to despise catching perch that are 6, 7, 8 inches. They're nothing but a nuisance to me. When they start getting over 11, 12 inches, and I'm pushing 13, 14, and the odd one that I might get 15, or if you never know, that next drop is going to be an Ontario record, especially when you're fishing last ice season. Boy, oh boy, that gets my juices flowing. And it's something I have so much reverence for those larger perch. The exact opposite that I do for their smaller brethren. So it's kind of weird. And those big ones are I think you'll agree, Jim, with big bluegills. Those big fish are really the ones that we should be releasing. It's almost the exact opposite that when I was a kid, my dad used to say, if it's big enough, we'll keep it. That kind of thinking has really shifted, as has so much during as we advance as anglers and realize what the best contribution is that we can make to the fishery. But catch and release of those big yellow perch, those big lake trout, big walleye, that's what's really a great personal contribution that we can make to the future of the fishery, regardless of whether we're allowed to keep them or not. It's voluntarily releasing them that really is going to make a major contribution.
Yeah, that's so true, guys. Like, I mean, I'm sure Gord with the science background will back me up on this. I have an example I use in a lot of the HT seminars that we do, and I often talk about it, is that I had an older lad one day. I was much younger then. He was probably about my age, so some old guy. And he said to me he was putting the little ones back down ice fishing, and he was catching crappies, and he was throwing down like 8 inches, 9 inches, 7 inches, keeping 10s and 12s. And I said to him, you should put some of those big fish back down the hole, keep some of those smaller ones. And he said, well, why? Why wouldn't you want to put them back down the hole so they can grow up and spawn? And I looked at him and I said, well, why wouldn't you just want to let the ones that already beat the odds and grew up be down the hole to spawn? And he looked at me and he thought about it for a few seconds, and he said, like, he looked right at me and he said to me, oh, I never thought of that. And that was something that we were always taught. Put the little ones back, let them grow. But in essence, it's the big ones that need to go back.
This is always an interesting debate, and certainly we've had that on the Lake Simcoe message board for years and years and years about releasing larger fish. On one side, there's the argument that fish is nearing the end of its lifetime. A 14 or 15-inch perch is nearing the end of its lifetime. It's already spawned multiple times. The genes, they make that fish so big and aggressive, are already out there. And then there's the other side of it is that, well, since those big perch, like big walleye, and this is, recent research has shown that these, the biggest fish, not only do they have the most eggs, they hold their eggs till they're riper and yields are much higher. So the argument about letting those bigger fish go, is the other side of that coin. And, I don't want to ever lecture anybody about keeping one of those, but personally, and as I've said in most of my videos, I let a lot of those 14 and 15-inch fish go just out of respect for people who know more about it than I do. And there's a lot of 10 to 12-inch fish down there, a lot of meal fish, if you will. And hasn't the perch fishing been spectacular this year?
John, you said one thing, and I hear the very same thing. They're old and they've grown. How do you know they're old? How do you know that they're not the Magic Johnsons, Wayne Gretzky's of the world? The bigger fish are not necessarily the oldest fish.
No.
General case they are the fastest growing. They have the best genetics. As you say, they have the biggest eggs. They lay them on the prime spawning habitat. And what I always say to anglers, and I used to say, we modernized the sport. That was my last job with M&R before I retired here in the Northwest, was modernizing the sport fish regs. And what I always said is, you get the fishery you deserve. And anglers see a regulation and they say, well, M&R says I can keep 50. Mm-hmm. No, M&R doesn't say that you should target 50. What limits are, and this is what most folks don't understand, what a limit is if you don't know when to stop, we'll tell you it's 2 lake trout. It's a maximum level of greed. That's what limits are. If you don't know to stop on lake trout, it's 2 then. But we would really like you to take 1 or many times. And here's the more frightening thing. If everybody kept 2, everybody kept their limit, the limit would be 1 very, very quickly. And if everyone kept that, it would be catcher. So the limit isn't something you go after. It's to tell you, if you don't know when to stop, we will tell you. And so your point's really well taken. But folks should not always assume a big lake trout is necessarily an old fish. And fish are one of the few animals on Earth. They lay eggs till the day they die, and the eggs aren't less viable when they get older. They're more viable. My buddy Jeff Madity heads up the Fort Capel hatchery in Saskatchewan, and Jeff will tell you, we're looking for the biggest fish possible because they have the best eggs. They mature faster. They hatch at 98, 99%. They're always looking for the biggest fish. When you start going into walleyes, they mature at 16 inches generally. They have about a 40% hatch rate. You get those larger walleyes, 98, 99%. No question about it. But
this is more recent findings about this. You know, that it was always thought that, and the reason that we have slot sizes for walleye in Ontario in so many places, because they say that the highest and healthier yields used to come from those 16 to 22-inch fish, and that's simply not true according to a lot of research that's coming out now that shows the older and bigger they are, the more eggs, the riper the eggs are, and as you say, the yields are much higher. So,
yeah, maybe a lot of that stuff was opinions, not science. You know, somebody just thinking healthier fish, you know, that kind of stuff.
Well, it's results from research that's been done in specific bodies of water, like Nipissing, and Georgian Bay. And it was over a longer period of time, but maybe the samplings of the particular year weren't what they needed to be. But anyway, that seems to have changed. A lot of this new opinion comes from Saginaw and those areas. As is the opinion of stocking on top of existing populations, right? But that's another subject.
Where's Victoria?
What was that, Gord?
I was looking for Victoria.
Yeah, she might have another question for us.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because every answer is 20 minutes.
Hey guys, where would you normally start? Oh, there's a great question. That's one of my favorite. Dave Wilson says, where would you normally start targeting splake, deep or shallow? And splake are like whitefish to me. They are the most variable, probably the two most variable species that we fish for in the wintertime. And for folks that don't know splake, they're a cross between speckled trout, which stay shallow, live very short lives. A 6-year-old speck is an old speckled trout. A 40-year-old lake trout is sometimes a juvenile. So they crossed lake trout and splake to try and get the best qualities of both fish. But lakers tend to be deep water oriented, speckled trout are shallow. And when you cross them over, and this is the most unique thing, it is lake specific. I have a couple of favorite splake lakes. My biggest is just under 10. And we get them in 8 feet of water. 8 is deep. I got another buddy. He fishes a totally different series of splake lakes. They start in 25, 30 feet of water. And so you've got to say, you know, this is a speckled trout, lake trout cross. Some days they're behaving like speckles. Other days they're behaving like lakers. And so they can be deep, they can be shallow. And what you need to do is pick one of those options and then keep moving. Test shallow, test deep, test mid-depth water, keep move. And then after you catch a couple of fish, you start to see that pattern evolving. And I know, Will, you go up to Gogama and you fish a splake up there and you're almost in that mid-range zone.
Yeah, you're right, Gord. We're hopefully going to be able to make that trip this year. We're not sure. I usually do it once or twice every winter, just south of Gogama. It's like Jim was saying, a lot of more people are taking winter destination ice fishing trips, and that's what this is always for me and a good friend of mine. He has a camp up south of Gogama, so it's a 10-hour drive. We park the vehicles down as far as we can down an old logging road, assuming that it's plowed, and then we drive our snowmobiles in the rest of the way, which is another hour, and then stay at a small cabin and fish different lakes during the course of the week. And there's a couple really good splake lakes there. But like Gord was saying, they behave differently according to their home that they're stocked into. So they will not reproduce. Splake put all of their energies into growth and chasing food, and they don't have to worry about reproducing, which can take away from valuable eating time. So during the they're usually hungry, and usually you can find them, but you might have to fish some lakes 40, 50 feet deep, particularly if they're feeding on pelagic bait fish or like smelt, for instance, those smelt can really throw things into a tizzy and make it a challenge, where you almost have to find the smelt before you do the splake. But for the lakes that I'm fishing, these wilderness lakes, it's usually, not more than 15, 18 feet deep, and usually around that 12-foot mark. I'm looking for main points as my primary target. But I don't want to forget about secondary points too, because a lot of times the primary point in a lake is where the majority of the locals are going to fish, and it could be hit hard. So I look for secondary points. There's times when the brook trout part in them will really seem to take over. And I'm even planting myself in front of a beaver house, Gord? And you swear you're fishing them like brook trout, and that brook trout part of them is taking over, and they pull towards those beaver houses like flies to honey. So an intriguing fish, definitely one of my favorites to fish for. Gord, I don't know if you've ever had it, but last year I had an instance where I got them so excited to come off bottom when I was reeling one in that they would follow the bait up like perch do on Lake Simcoe. And I had all these like 4 and 5 pound splake that were like waiting for me right below the hole. I didn't even have to drop at the bottom. And it was like, God, it was like I died and went to heaven. It was so much fun.
I will say one thing about Splake, Will, and I'll share a little secret here, is on many, many lakes, the part of the lake trout that comes out of them so heavily is they feed right at sunset. Mm-hmm. And it's so, they're almost like walleye. And so Dave's question there about Splake, and that you hit on it really well, is hard structure. And that is the hard part, the hard structure. That's the lake trout coming out of them. And for anybody that fishes lake trout, get out early in the morning or right at sunset, and everybody else can have the rest of the day. And those 2 times you'll outproduce everything else. But for Splake, at sunset, they're just like walleye, and they flood those hard bottom structures, and it's game on.
I got to mention, I'm not really a Splake guy, but I have a couple of good buddies that fish a lot of the small Splake lakes in Eastern Ontario here. And when they fish, they start off, one guy's in 7-8 feet of water, the other guy's out in 20-25, and they'll just drill a couple of holes, fish for a few minutes. They'll walk 25 yards, drill a couple of holes, and they have this one island that there's always a ton of Splake around. And inevitably, they contact them. And it's just like you guys say, one day they're up on the shore, the next day they're out in the middle. And that's why they have one guy in 25, 1 and 8, and they move around the island and they contact them and they get them. And they always, Gord, they always stay till dark. They're always coming out in the dark, and it's always, oh yeah, we got them right at the end of the day. So it's cool.
Okay, guys, we have another question. Tony's asking, when ice fishing, do you typically use live bait or artificial? Which one do you prefer?
Gord, show him your trick.
Okay, I'll tell you what. If you gave me, Victoria, and the person who asked that question, if you gave me 2 dozen of the freshest, liveliest minnows, I would dump them on the ice until they died, and then I'd nip off their heads. And here's the secret. What this is, if I could have kept one thing secret ice fishing, this was the tip. And we were filming an in-fisherman television show one time. This was about 12, 15 years ago now. And we were getting jumbo, huge perch. It was incredible. And Doug Stange knew I did not want anyone to know about this. And on camera, Doug came walking in just after I'd caught a fish, and he said, "Gord, you took that hook out awful quick. Why don't you show the folks what you did?" And the secret got exposed. And what the secret is taking, so I don't care if you're fishing, I do this with jigging wraps, I do it with William, every lure that I have, I take the treble hook off, and I put what's called a fast attach clip on where the treble hook was. And then I take the treble hook and I put it on the fast attach. And what it allows you to do is one turn, and now you've got your treble hook comes off. And there you can see the treble hook. And then what I do is I take those minnows that were live and now they're dead, and I clip their head off. So there's the head of a clipped off minnow. I take the shank of my treble hook, and I shove it through the head of the minnow. And there is no way on God's green earth that a fish now, a perch, a lake trout, a walleye, a sauger, anything can come in and hit your bait and not get hooked. It is 100% hooking success. You take your hook, and because you put it on a fast attach clip and not the split ring, is now you just take your hook, and I don't have my glasses.
Here. Or mine.
I can't, but you take your fast edge clip, put it back on, and now you've got it. I don't have my glasses here, but it is the deadliest trick known to man. And here's an honest truth. In the last 10 years, I cannot recall a single time ice fishing for any species that I bought live bait for. I simply don't use live bait. You catch smaller fish, you catch fewer fish. And the problem with live bait, I've talked about this many, many times in seminars. The problem with live bait, there, I can see it just well enough. There it is again. Now there's not a fish that can come in and hit that. And the interesting thing, see all rocks? So a perch will come in, and this is what a lot of folks don't realize. When they open their gills and inhale, all that happens is that now swivels, and it just swivels right into their mouth. The spoon, every time you jig, your bait, two phases. You have to attract the fish to call them in, and you have to trigger them. And as Jim was talking earlier, but with that feathered hook, you attract them with this part of the bait and the jigging, then you stop and you trigger them with the minnow head. And deadliest system known to man. The problem with live bait, most days you catch just enough to get you to go back to the bait shop and buy more the next time you go in. But for perch on things like custom diamond willow lure, Russian hooks, slab grabbers, so there are, I don't care what species you name, honest truth, I bet every one of us can give a better alternative than live bait.
Yeah, that's true. I never use live bait. I haven't. I think I've used live bait once in the last 20 years. I had a friend that used to use large suckers for big spring pike, which is a lot of fun. I just didn't think it was necessary most of the time. The thing is that just keeping live bait when you're traveling around the ice, trying to keep them alive, it's just another thing to maintain. And, as you talk about getting fish to focus on, when fish are on, they're going to hit anything, Basically, you can throw a piece of tin down there or a Coke can and get a perch to hit it when they're really on. But when they start to die off, they become focused on such small things like a slab grabber. I have hundreds of hours of underwater video watching fish, picking away at the bead on a slab grabber, or I use a Johnson thin fisher spoon and I take the treble hook off. I don't use treble hooks either. I take the treble hook off of it and put on a chartreuse fusion hook, and they eat that chartreuse hook with nothing on it. And it just, once you understand the characteristics of the fish and the feeding time, the progression of the feeding time and so on, you start to understand what will trigger the fish and how little you actually need out there. Until you get into Will's expertise, which getting big perch to eat very small things, and he has the patience for it. So I'm a tin slammer, and he has the patience to.
Well, I might have the patience, John, but I agree with the two of you. It's been decades since I've used, bought a pile of minnows and brought them out. I'm the same. mindset that you can do much better with the variety of artificial lures that we have now than you can with live bait. It's a pain to carry them out, and you're limited to one presentation when you've got that live bait. So I stay away from it. You know, you look at some of the baits that are available now, like this GT. Swim bait that Storm has out. They're so realistic, and there are so many natural presentations where you can simulate live bait that it makes it it's just so much more of a pain to go out there and buy them yourself. And you were talking about some of my small baits, John. I love the tiny little marmushka jigs that HT puts out. You can see if you want to simulate a minnow, you can. You can put a little craw on it, a micro craw. You can put little fake maggots on it. There was a time when I used to fish a lot of the larger ice fishing tournaments, like the Canadian Ice Fishing Championships, or my first tournament was the World Ice Fishing Championships back in 1991, and the Swedes kicked our butts. And we were allowed to use live bait in that tournament. And way back then, Team Canada did, all the other teams did, Sweden didn't. They used these tiny little baits, but they used live bait too. But you know what they did? They smuggled across the border maggots in little tins. And they used these maggots to hook onto their marmushkas. And I cornered them when the tournament was over and said to them, okay, guys, you beat our butts. You're headed on a plane and going home. Show me what you did. So they pulled out their light micro tackle, 1 and 2 pound test line, these little toy rods that I thought were a joke. And they were catching whitefish and lake trout and big jumbo perch, all because the fish were turned off. We have to realize fish aren't always actively feeding when even a minnow can scare them. and these little tiny baits with marmushkas did the trick for them, and they took home first place and beat us on our home turf. So it was a humbling lesson, but I learned way back in 1991 that finesse really can be the trigger when fish are not actively feeding, and you don't need live minnows. Live maggots, perhaps every once in a while if you can find them, but there's so many good imitations now, the ice candy and the trigger sense and all kinds of great imitations that you can use instead of the real thing.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that when it comes to live bait, sometimes I have some maggots on hand, and not just for panfish either. I've spent a lot of time with with a jig and wrap, or even now a rattle bait with 4 or 5 maggots on each hook. But when you mentioned about finesse, and when I would fish for bluegills, check out this little thing. I get it in front of the camera here. See how small that is? It's almost impossible for you to see it.
Yeah.
How teeny it is. Sometimes that and 2 or 3 pound test line, and you're hawking them out one after the other. You go up to something twice that size. But Will, you had mentioned about fake maggots, the HT, the ice sense.
Right.
Awesome stuff, and it's sort of like it's stretchy too, so it doesn't tear off. It's just another option if you like. And I've got that thing imprinted in my brain about seeing a little jig like that, like a little larvae jig or a fat boy, because growing up with Gens teaching me how to do this, there was just something about a fat boy and a maggot that I had to use. You know, you watch this guy hawking fish out, and once it's stuck in your head, you just keep doing it. But
jump in on Victoria.
We got a couple more questions.
Okay.
We'll start with this one. So when it comes to ice fishing, is it like, do you need to let the ice settle after you drill, or can you just drill and go for it?
Drill and go for it.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people don't understand, that the hole can both spook fish, depending on the time of the season. The drilling the hole can spook fish, and it can attract fish. One of the things that I try to tell people about fishing mid-season, particularly getting into the February blaws and you're fishing deeper water, deeper water, 30, 50 feet, say, for whitefish or lake trout. If the ice is snow covered, one of the most attracted things they do, when you drill a hole and that beam of light goes down, that really gets a lot of attention. Now, sometimes people go up and they drill a hole and they drop their first bait down and bang, they get a fish. They're thinking, what a great spot this is. And then an hour later, they don't have another one. And the only thing that attracted them to that hole was the initial beam of light going down. So it's so then they have to move, of course. But
it's a weird deal, though, because there are times, particularly when gas augers were so popular. Fortunately, we're seeing a time, right that we're living through now, and there's a huge transition towards lithium-powered augers, and I've certainly gone that route with my Strike Master. So quiet and so efficient, but during tournaments, especially when if we ever had a guy come in with a gas auger in shallow water, particularly, and he started that thing up, he's lucky he didn't get shot, because that can definitely spook fish as well. So, it depends on where you're fishing and what you're fishing for, the depth, the whole bit, and the activity level of the fish. Some days it seems nothing will spook them. Other days, you jump on the ice and you're going to scare them away.
It's probably more of an issue during first ice early in the season, where there isn't a lot of traffic on there, particularly when fishing perch. A lot of the perch areas where they eventually put up huts, of course, there's no traffic early in the season. You go out there and you drill a hole with a gas auger and you might have to wait 15 minutes to get bit. But during the mid-season, when there's all kinds of traffic on the ice and noise and people having a good time and everything, fish become a little more, they'll ignore a lot of that noise and they're going to go about their duty about eating anyway. So
go for it, Victoria.
Okay, so we have another question. Is there a specific technique or something that you can recommend to target deep water lake trout?
Oh, absolutely.
Let me start with it. More lake trout have been caught on a white tube jig than all other baits put together. And the mistake, Al Lindner used to come up. We always had Al used to come up, and we always took him back for an adventure. And here's the secret: with lake trout in the winter, are the easiest fish to pattern. They are the easiest fish to pattern in the winter. But
agreed.
You can't go out and drill one or two holes. So I'll never forget the first time Al came up and we went back into a remote area. And I've talked about this and told this story many, many times. It was super cold. It was about 30 below, and there was 5 or 6 of us on the ice. And I always remembered I was drilling holes. My buddy John was coming behind me. So I'd drill holes, big 10-inch holes through the ice. John would come behind with a shovel and a scoop, clean the hole out. And every time I'd drill, and we'd do this, and I was drilling about 20 holes on this point. And every time I did that, I was looking in the back out of the side of my eye, could see Al. And we'd no sooner get a hole clean and he'd jig it, start at the bottom, work all the way up to the top. Anyway, after about 20 minutes, I drilled, 20, 30. I was sweating. I needed a drink of water. And, we finally got 20 holes drilled in the ice. And it was early in the morning. It was still dark. It was just dawning. And I saw Al out of the corner of he jumped on his snow machine, zipped it up, pulled on his hood, and he roared right up to me. And flipped up his visor and he said, "Gord, I checked them all. There ain't any trout here. Let's go." I guarantee that day, we drilled 200 to 500 holes. We fished 10 to 12 different locations. We put 36 lake trout onto the ice. Wow. Once you catch one fish, one trout is not a pattern. 2 fish, ooh, you know what? That's 2. 3 fish, you're on to something. Did you catch it in 42 feet? Did you catch it in 62 feet? Did you fish it taking it away from the fish fast? Did you catch it when you dropped the tube? And you can catch them on airplane jigs, tube jigs. The lure isn't the important thing. With lake trout, it's all about location. If there are no fish where you are fishing, I do not care what rod, reel, line, lure you're using. You will not catch them. And most folks go out and they drill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. They sit in a shack and you're a self-fulfilling prophet. When Al came up, honest truth, he came up for the week. I guarantee we put 200 to 500 lake trout. As long as the weather stays the same, that first day in the first 2-3 hours after you've caught 2, 3, 4 trout, and you go, wait a sec, they're all coming in 62 feet of water off rock ridges or off bluffs or off point. As long as the weather stays stable, that you can take that pattern to the bank for the rest of the week until the weather change. And I guarantee you'll catch 100 to 500 trout. Lake trout are the easiest fish to pattern.
I agree with that. But I don't know if you'll catch 200 to 500 lake trout on Lake Simcoe.
No.
I don't know if we have 200 to 500 Lake Simcoe. If we went up to Georgian Bay, though, there are places up there. If you want to get those little, 1 to 4 pounders there seems like an endless supply of them, and you can pattern them pretty quickly. Like Gord said, if they're in 40 feet of water, you're probably going to get 10 of them in 40 feet of water. I don't know if I put in the energy to drill 500 holes, but I might drill 10 in a day. If you can't get a pattern by then you should just go to the gym.
I'll tell you the honest truth, though. I'll tell you, our trout fishing up here is tougher than it is on Simcoe. I grew up fishing Simcoe. We have no stocking. It's all pulse fishing, and that's the reason you have to move. You can't sit and wait for the fish to come to you. I guarantee we fish lakes that have less populations of trout than you have on Lake Simcoe. We don't get 250,000 stocked in our lakes. It's all 100% natural reproduction, and our densities are very, very low. And that's actually part of the reason why the fish grow so big. But the key is move, move, move. Location is the secret. You have to be fishing where fish are, and you can't wait for them to come to you.
Okay, so we're going to go for a quick 30-second break, and then we're going to come back, and I have some more questions for you guys. So 1 sec.
Outdoor Canada. Don't miss a single issue of Canada's only national hunting and fishing magazine. Subscribe to Outdoor Canada today.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so I have another question coming from Brian. He wants to know, what's the hardest fish to pattern for in the winter?
What was the question?
What's the hardest fish to pattern for in the winter?
What key?
What is the hardest fish to pattern in the winter?
Oh, whitefish.
I was going to say that the easiest, but
Will came up the Lake of the Woods, and Will, you'll attest to this, with Bob and Big Jim. And I was filming an in-fish television show the first day for Whitey's. Yeah. And so I put Bob Azumi, Wayne Azumi, Mark Alford, Will, Jim. I put them on one of our best whitefish spots. They use Lake Simcoe techniques, and you caught zero whitefish. We caught so many. So the next day, Doug went home. We filmed the in-fish show. We went but we fished them totally differently, and we put 300 whitefish on the ice the next day. Big Jim puts 30 in 60 minutes. and not one came on a Lake Simcoe technique. Right, Will? Right, Jim?
Right on.
Yep.
All in the middle of the water column. And if I came to Simcoe right now, I would not catch a whitefish. I would be, I know they're on the bottom eating gobies and you use meags, jigs, but you know what? Whitefish, and the science has shown this right now. If you use, we're losing them on the Great Lakes because of mussels and gobies, but whitefish, believe it or not, don't want to eat gobies. That is not their preference, but there's so many they will do it. And it's so tough. For me, whitefish is a lake-specific fish to pattern.
I agree.
Yeah, they can be
Gord,
difficult because they're so adaptable to whatever the forage is.
100%.
There's places where I was fishing with John a few weeks ago, and they're in the mud eating little red worms. And I got one in 18 foot of water where you're expecting yellow perch. On the other hand, there's other guys on Lake Simcoe now. You were talking about the meags and the bad boys type baits and blue foxies. And if you can see that here, that's what they're getting them on this little deal right here. And they're just bouncing it off of bottom because they know that these whitefish are feeding off of gobies, gobies don't have an air bladder, so they're always right on bottom, and they'll dart around like no other fish does, and that's what they're imitating with that bait. When I was with Gord and Big Jim all those many years ago, if I'm not mistaken, Gord, you had a major smelt infestation then, and these whitefish, despite what I call their underslung mouths, that evolution has taught them to pick up food off bottom because that's how they're created. They're ideally suited with their mouths below protruding, and they slurp stuff up like that, and that's how they're meant to feed.
But that's true.
But they've
also
adapted on Lake of the Woods to come up to 30, 40 feet and feed like lake trout. So it's crazy. They're so adaptive. And for that reason, I kind of agree with Gord in terms of how difficult they can be to pattern. I think I knew where John was going. Once you figured out that pattern and where they are, boy, you can have a heyday. But they're often in many parts of Ontario, certainly not on Lake Simcoe, a very underutilized species, and a lot of lake trout lakes have them, and people don't even know it. And they're one of the finest tasting, most delicious fish out there that you can catch during the winter, regardless of what Big Jim says and always makes fun of me about. In every seminar that I ever give, he makes fun of the fact that I love to eat whitefish. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Jim for his comments.
Will always does a part in his HD evenings that we do, guys. And he talks about soaking them overnight in milk and everything else. And I always tell him, so what do? You soak them overnight in the milk, and then you go over to the garbage can and dump them in. I always my taste buds and whitefish, unless they're smoked, don't get along.
I think
I think that might change if you started to get some of these nice naturals that we have on Simcoe now. They're smaller, there's less fat on them, the meat is firmer, and of course, up in the north end of the lake from 8 Mile Point, the whole ring down to Thurlow Island, they're probably 90% naturals now. They've been that way now for multiple years, and they are a different fish. They don't seem to grow as fast. I've been told that the stockfish grow much faster. I think that might have been old, though. I'm not sure that that's true anymore. They grew much faster before because they all headed out like Gord fish for them in deep water, suspending them. But that's what everybody did on Lake Simcoe for years when all those fish were out in the middle grounds. They fished them 10, 20 feet off the bottom with Williams spoons, and they'd have a heyday. They'd have 30 and 40 fish days. And when all those stock fish out there disappeared, when the smelt disappeared, they stopped growing at the rates that they were growing, and we were back into what is more traditionally a food web for whitefish, which is in shallower water, and they're eating all kinds of things from very food-rich shoals, like they're eating mussels, but they're actually eating the mussel, not the shell, but they eat the whole shell, right? But they're picking off these little tiny mussels. They're eating flies. They're eating red worms. That is traditional whitefish forage. So smelt is something they adapted to when they're stocked or there's huge populations, and it's an easy prey. So
one other tip for anyone that ever wants to keep whitefish is in the cleaning process. Make sure that you take the time to remove that pink membrane that is next to the fillet. I know folks that have left that on and say, boy, it's so fishy tasting. I don't know if that's what happened to Jim, but
it probably is.
But if you take the time to remove that and the part of the lateral line through the fish, strip that right out. Another tip that I've just started to do is to cut the gills out on the ice and bleed the fish. Something relatively new. I know some folks have been doing it for years. I've just started the last few years, and it makes cleaning a lot easier, but you get the nice white flesh without the blood throughout it.
Well, yeah, you know,
we might as well maximize and make the best use of this amazing resource, because we sure don't want it to be a poor experience when you're eating them.
Yeah, you know, that's so true, Will. Yeah, when I go out and I think I'm going to keep a couple of fish, if I catch a nice little 2.5, 3 pound walleye and I decide I'm going to keep it, I don't keep any fish. I bonk them in the head and put them in the cooler.
Yeah.
I see guys they put them on a stringer and they drag it around in 90-degree surface water all day, gas and oil floating on top of the water. The fish is in it, you know. I mean, it's got algae around. It's just like. And you wonder why it doesn't taste good, you know, like you just...
Oh, I put that 10W30 sauce on it anyway.
That's okay. A lot of the times when you cook lake trout, when you put them in a pan, you don't even have to add oil. You just heat them up a little bit, and it just comes out of them into the pan.
But like you, Jim, I didn't like them either because I lived in Kempenfelt Bay and I fished for those stocked fish that grew really fast, and they had a lot of fat on them. You know, you had to be peeling that off all the time, and they were mushy. But when I moved up to the north, I started fishing up here before I moved up here 13, 14 years ago. And I fished for big lake trout. And if you want big lake trout, they're going to be shallow. And I'd be looking for small whitefish on shoals. And every once in a while I kept one and I found, wow, this is a completely different fish to eat.
Really?
You know, when I catch in those lake trout over 20 pounds, they've got these little 2-pound whitefish in them, you know. So if you found a shoal that there was a lot of those smaller whitefish on, then you'd probably find part of the milk run for a big lake trout.
Yeah, I know. Will, remember we did a presentation at that community center above Kingston that time?
Yeah.
The guys on whitefish and that. I got to fish a couple of lakes with buddies that I know that fish whitefish there, and they catch. The average one is like 2 to 3 pounds. Not that there aren't bigger ones. In fact, most of them are probably closer to 2, but there's literally hordes of them.
Right.
And I mean hordes. Like you think it's bait fish on the electronics, and you just see them down there. There's just a ton of them. Now, those fish are more like gourds on Lake of the Woods, is that you could be at 80 feet of water and they're 40 feet down.
Yeah, suspended. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Out on the bottom, we caught them on very small loops.
And that's how they fish for them on Georgian Bay. When they put out the nets, you know, they have these sections on the bottom to let the lake trout go through on the bottom, and they're catching those whitefish suspended. You know, they're fishing 50, 60, 70 feet of water where the nets are, and those whitefish are all coming in mid-column.
Well, that time with Gord, when we were out there, I mean, that was unbelievable because all my life I've been taught that a whitefish, you know, because everywhere I ever fished them when I was younger was usually around Simcoe or in Simcoe. And boy, you had to be on the bottom. It's what you did.
Well,
You know,
you
that's
did that, yeah, and I think that's probably where in the lake that you're fishing them, because there's different populations of fish and they act very differently as well. Again, when we had all those fish out in the mid lake, everybody used that old technique, of using the first 20 feet of the water column from the bottom up to catch whitefish. But years later, when they all disappeared, people wonder where those whitefish are gone. They go out there and they'd be catching 30 and 40 fish a piece. They used to go up by the truckloads out there, and they wonder where all those whitefish went. Well, that's where they went. They're all caught,
don't think.
but there
Don't
was
think
always
you
a
can.
population shallow. And you fish
Yeah.
for those fish very differently. Their forage is very different than those fat fish that are, roaming around out there looking for smelt.
Yeah. Really cool though. Really, really cool fish.
Yeah. Entertaining for us here on Simcoe, anyway.
Me again.
Yay.
So we're going to go to a quick commercial, and then I'm going to come back with some more questions because there's a bunch that just came in. So hold tight, and we'll be right back.
What makes me work so hard? What am I really after? When you pursue a fish like a muskie, let's be clear, there's no fish like a muskie. Every magic hour on the water marks another step closer. The muscle memory of a million casts fires again and again, as natural as every breath that I take. Every twitch is done with a purpose. The elements are my best friend and my worst enemy. I put my body and equipment to the test again and again, and we always want one more test.
Look at that.
A lifetime on the water has taught me to think, feel, and notice things that most people wouldn't understand.
Cover ground, move fast with the trolling motor, then all of a sudden when you see a fish or catch a fish, then you dial in the paddle.
I can't stop. Just one more cast, strike, fight. But I've already caught the fish. The elusive fish. Impossible fish. Giant fish. And I let every one of them go. So what am I really after? I live for the pursuit.
And we're back. Okay, so we have a question from Matt. He's wondering the debate between lead and tungsten. What's everyone's preference, and do you like the environmental concerns behind it?
Well, I like tungsten. I like it because a lot of the bluegill fishing I do, I can use things that are smaller and they get down faster. The number of times when I talked to you about that 23, 25, 18 to 25 feet of water, you catch one, you bring them up, you unhook them, you're watching your flasher and you see them disappear or start to disappear. That tungsten goes back down a lot faster with the same size. Yep. That's that. 3-pound test micro ice. It's gone. It just takes it back down so fast. Tungsten is tungsten's a really cool stuff when it comes to fishing, but I really don't think that lead wasn't quite the big problem in fishing that it was with the shotgun deal, with all the things. I mean, I know working with Phil Morlock, who did a lot of the work with Shimano on when they did all the studying and they dealt with people about lead and its effects on fish and things like that. It was more the birds it affected than the fish. It wasn't really a factor to the fish, and it's just it's you didn't have to use tungsten because lead was really the problem. It was in fishing, because it's not. And I just like it more. It just works better.
Yeah, it's 100% better, Jim. Size difference, twice as heavy, half the size, falls faster. You can go to much smaller baits that fish big. And we talk about that all the time. Small baits that fish big, and that's what tungsten does. When you bang a rock with it, it's much noisier. You can feel it better. When you put it on 1 pound, 2 pound, 3 pound line, it fishes better, it swims better. Environmental concerns to the side, it's just 100 times better than lead.
Yeah, something you brought up there about the noise off of the rocks. For a long time, I've been using tungsten pencil weights for drop shot, particularly when you get in an area where you have to stroll along for them. They won't take it any other way. And you can feel that the difference between tungsten and lead. When you're banging it off those little pebble and gravel patches, you can almost read what's down there from that weight. So, and again, it's a lot smaller. So, in a lot of cases, it doesn't matter what the size is when you're dragging a drop shot. But certainly when you for any other baits, particularly for panfish, tungsten's the way to go.
Yeah, just as an example here, this little tungsten marmushka jig. Before the tungsten, they were all lead jigs, and they sink. The lead sinks about half the rate. It's so important if you've got a school of yellow perch going. They compete with one another, and if you take your time, even 10 seconds longer than normal to drop that bait down, you could lose that whole school. So in order to keep that frenzy going, a lot of anglers that aren't familiar with what we're talking about, it's something it's a sense of urgency to get that bait down as quickly and rapidly as possible, without having to upsize. You don't want to use a full 1/4 or 3/8 ounce jig to get down quickly for yellow perch, because it's too big of an offering. But those tiny little ones made out of tungsten that fall real quick will keep that school going. In terms of the environmental implications, I'm very reluctant, personally, speaking of myself anyways, to move towards banning lead outright within the tackle industry, because it is tungsten is far more expensive. When you're getting into your 1/4 and 3/4 ounce jig heads, they're not really an environmental concern in terms of a lot of loons or other species of or fish or other birds consuming them. I think what Jim was alluding to earlier were those small pellet sized BBs that you find in shotguns, or perhaps, and I'm not even certain, but those smaller pellet sized bait weights that steelhead fishermen may use. They can be consumed by waterfowl, and that could be an issue. But like a 3/4 ounce jig that lays inert on the bottom, if it's a lead head, I'm very reluctant to think that poses a large environmental concern, laying inert at the bottom of a lake if that jig is lost. So, everything in moderation. If we can move towards a substance like tungsten and do so efficiently and without impacting the industry, or that it's a band-aid to an issue that really isn't there, that's another matter. But I'm in no hurry for the whole industry to overnight get rid of lead.
Yeah, I read a thing out of the U.S. that was done by one of the big pollution control groups about the environmental effects of the mining of tungsten, the amount of fossil fuels that have to be burned, the amount of energy consumed to smelt tungsten, the numbers of tens of thousands of truckloads of dirt that have to be blasted and ore or whatever they call it, and bring in to get that tungsten out of it is absolutely off the charts. It's huge. So if you look at the environment as a whole, not just one little pigeonholed thing with the lead and fishing. If you're burning, just a copious amount of fossil fuel to bring this lead to smelt it, or to bring this ore to smelt it to get the tungsten. So there's still a bad effect on the environment if you look at it that way. And I was surprised because I thought when I read this thing that they were going to go the exact opposite way and try to say, because they're just trying to slam fishing. It's because that's one thing you have to watch out with these environmental groups, is that you have to remember a lot of them, they do a lot of good work, but a lot of them also have an agenda, and the agenda is that they want to stop sport fishing. It's one of those things.
Mm-hmm. Where are you, Victoria?
Hello. Okay, so we have a question. It's based on your favorite lake. What is your favorite lure to go to? Like your go-to lure, and maybe just like touch on what species you'd be targeting, or if there is a lure that you can use for multiple species. Like what's your go-to lure when you're ice fishing?
I'll start it.
Go ahead.
By far, my go-to lure for almost any species has been a Seville vibrato. It probably accounts for more lake trout on Lake Simcoe now than all other lures combined. You can fish for whitefish with it. It was originally a popular walleye lure. It kind of came back to life again on Simcoe as a lake trout lure. It's so versatile, and I can't think of another lure that would give the presence of a spoon, the vibration of say a lipless crank, and the ability to disturb the bottom, claw the bottom, or tap the bottom. So it's extremely versatile lure for all depths as well, and fished on the bottom or mid column.
I'm going to throw my vote in. In fact, I just did a piece in Outdoor Canada, and we did another one in Fisherman a couple of years ago. And in both cases came out number one in my books is a jigging wrap. There is no bait that is more versatile than a jigging wrap. And it's little tiny stages, yellow perch, black crappie, devour the thing. Another great one is the Acme Hyper Glide. It's modeled after the very same. Freedom Lures has one as well, Snapback Shad. But the original jigging wrap is in my books the best lure ever. We use it for whitefish. We use it for lake trout. You can fish it high. You can fish it fast. You can fish it slow. You can tip it. So I'll throw my vote behind the jigging wrap. I never go walleye fishing without it. Never go lake trout fishing without it. Never go whitefish fishing without it. Never go crappie or perch fishing without it. And you just vary the size. You don't need to tip it. It just works so well.
Go ahead, Willie.
Okay, well, you know what? It's such a difficult question because we have tackle boxes loaded with so many different lures, and picking one is awfully an unfair question to ask. But having said that, the jigging wrap, man, I've been fishing that since I was 10 years old, and I still always have one with me out on the ice. It's so versatile. I like to think of lures in either a horizontal or a vertical presentation. The jigging wrap and the vibrato are two amazing horizontal presentations that are great for active and semi-active fish. When they are turned off, I like to use a jig and a minnow, plastic minnow, something very simple like this here. I have a hard time showing it on the camera, but a very simple little bait. It will catch anything, anywhere. So maybe if I had to go for those inactive fish, it would be a jig and a fake minnow. For spoons, the typical vertical presentation. I love a Morsilda by Blue Fox. It's one of the few spoons I know that very seldom flips over on you. It's dynamite for brook trout and splake in northern lakes. I do great with lake trout and walleye with it. So you're talking to someone that brings 15 rods out with them and likes to use every one of them during the course of the day. But if I had to nail it down, it would be a jig and a plastic minnow. And I'll pass it on to Jim. He's reaching for his favorite.
This is something years ago in just fishing. Gord sent me over an article, and he was going to write about these lures that I had never seen. And you recognize that, Gord?
Fergie spoon.
The Fergie special.
Yeah.
That has become an integral part of my fishing. 2 treble hooks on it, which are good to load up with maggots. It sinks like a rock. If you let it go on controlled line, like don't let the line just flop off the spool, it sinks like a rock, as you know, Gord. They go straight down, like they're down there fast, and that's not a very big lure. I've loaded perch with this. I've caught walleyes. I've been bitten off, so you know pike like to eat them. We've caught lake trout. I've caught all kinds of fish in them, and it's a confidence thing. First time I ever put one of these down was in the big Rito for lake trout, just a white one. I dropped it down. I let it go down to about 45 feet. We had seen some fish on the graph, and pow, I just smacked it. But something I've been hanging on the back of these things, and I don't work for these guys or nothing like that. These treble hooks now that they have that have the little spinner, teeny little spinner on the back, add that to the back of anything you use, any spoon, you know, it could be you could probably put it on the back of a jig and wrap. I put it on the back of these, but man, there is something about that little flash at the back, and it's a quality hook too, you know, so it's all good. I see our fearless leader here.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we're gonna only because I can't believe how fast this time went. The interesting part of this whole thing is how many people aren't working today. I had to point that out because I can't believe the amount of questions.
I know, I can see them on the lake out here.
I can't believe how many questions. Like, you guys don't even have a clue. We were worried about how many questions were going to come in, and far from being a problem, right? So, but it did kind of in the background. I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but to our viewers, I really think that, with what we're trying to do with this whole site and becoming an angler's informative operation, like we would like to maybe invite everybody back and not putting in a spot, and really dedicate maybe a longer period, because there's so much information when it comes to ice fishing. And again, you guys have done a great job considering what you've done here today. So we really appreciate it. What I do want to touch base on real quick before I let you guys go, and John, you know what? Don't worry, there's still a chance for you, buddy, because I know you still got a few years there. But today we inducted Walter Oster for the Angler Hall of Fame, and 3 of our panelists here today are Angler Hall of Famers, right? So Gord, Will, Big Jim, you guys have all had that honor, and today we've included Walter to it. And how do you guys? Some of you guys had the chance to get in today. I know some of you guys were traveling in that time, but it's pretty cool, right?
Very, very cool. And he has caught bigger lake trout than all of us. So
true.
So for the folks who don't know who Walter is the man behind the Toronto Sports Patrol over the past 20 or 30 years, because of nonprofit. Now, obviously, unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but he has done a lot of great things, and we appreciate all you've done for us, Walter, and we're going to keep recognizing it. Go ahead, Gord.
I want to say something too, because we need to thank you, Andy. And talking about the Hall of Fame, this is the irony. You can't put yourself in there, but I will say this for everyone in the industry, everyone on this panel, and everyone on the panels for the next 4 days, is you are the guy who should be in the Canadian Angler Hall of Fame. I agree. You have done more for fishing than anyone else in the country, and you're too humble to put yourself in. So some year you need to have Vita put your name on it and let everyone vote for who's to come in next.
Well, when we put it together, it was with Patrick Welsh was actually a part of that, and also my friend Hamilton. So we actually designed that, and we actually brought in you guys. We gave it back to you guys, and it's really means something to be an Angler Hall of Famer. It's not just something I have to be elected. So when that day comes, I will be very humbled to accept that, but it'll be because of your kind words and other people's, and I can't say enough. But guys, I'm going to tell you, I'm proud of everybody who's part of that. I'm really happy for Walter, and it would have been nice if it would have happened a few years back, because he definitely would have enjoyed that. And in talking about Walter and talking about the Spring Fishing Show, and I just want to throw out a happy birthday to Mayor Hazel. She's going to be 100 years old on Valentine's Day, which is in 2 days from now, and
she's almost as old as Jim.
Yeah, and she's been a big part of with Walter and the salmon, and she's been a big part of the fishing community. So it's good to see people like that there. And again, guys, when you are out there ice fishing, I think you guys have emphasized on it. Be careful of your surroundings and everything else. But again, guys, Big Jim, can't begin to thank you for being here today. We're going to have you again tomorrow. We got you on a panel for pike in the afternoon, which is new for us, and we're hoping we're going to expand on that for next year and maybe making that a closed room seminar. Will, I can't begin to thank you. This whole ice fishing component's always been, you've always put that together for us, and we appreciate that, and everybody's a part of that. John, I can't begin to thank you, dude. You know what, you do a lot for us. Like, it's not CSFL related, salmon related. Your spoon pullers is you guys. Time Underwater, that's all you. These are all websites that people can go in, and information on all these locations. You keep getting that stuff, get the information to benefit your fishing, getting out there. My friend Gord, I don't even know what to say. You're the man, buddy. I've always had. You're the encyclopedia of fishing. You're the science, and what you say is gospel in my book. So I really appreciate what you do for us, and it means a lot. So. Dude, I don't know what to say to all you guys. Thank you very much. And I'm going to put you on the spot, because not right now, but we're going to try and put together a show dedicated strictly to ice fishing. Maybe give you guys a little more time each to dedicate. So I know you had PowerPoint presentation and all kinds of stuff, and this time just went right by us. So guys, thank you very much for being here. I can't begin to thank you enough. And I want to apologize. There was a couple of glitches there, but you were the first panel. I can guarantee there won't be any more glitches moving forward. So thank you very much, guys.
Welcome, buddy.
Thank you, Andy.
Take care, Andy.
And thanks to Victoria for keeping us in line today.
Yes, thank you, Victoria.
She's good, man. She's the best. So thank you. Thank you, Victoria. And thank you, Darren. All right.
Thanks.
And Nicole. Thanks, guys.
Good luck with the rest of the show.
So long, guys.
Be good.
Bye, guys.
Am I still live? I'm still live? No, I'm not. Okay.
24 inches of ice isn't gonna drill itself! Move it, Gary! I know you can move faster than this! Move it! Move it! Water is for fish. Let's get on that hummingbird. 2D sonar, GPS, flasher, split screen, GPS, flasher. Another angler just started fishing next to you, and now you're getting interference from his flasher. Change that frequency. Dunk! Mid-generate 10 below. Are you gonna give up, or are you gonna get your limit on bluegills? Do it! He's getting ready for ice season. How about you? Let's go, boys. Time's up.
Welcome back, and we're going to go into a presentation. Paul Palace, we actually pre-recorded the presentation only because we wanted to make sure when it comes to the fish cleaning presentation, it's always been one of our biggest presentations at the Spring Fishing Show, especially for you guys that have sit into it. And Paul's always made it extremely entertaining. So. I can tell you right now that the man is a genius. I've never seen anybody fillet anything faster. We have fun with them and how fast we can do it. And that stuff will all be back again next year. But I can tell you right now, the man is incredible. He offers a chartering business down in Erio with more specific to walleye, but they do have some trout down there, but it's more walleye. And I can tell you from the people that have gone through our show that have been there, they've really appreciated it. So you can actually, tomorrow, he'll be on a presentation for Great Lake trolling, and that'll be, I think, sometime around noon. You just have to check that schedule, and that'll be happening tomorrow. So it'll be a pretty cool presentation, especially with the direction of the Spring Fishing Show going into getting into more of the great salmon hunt. So we're going to go to commercial and come back with Paul Klaus.
I got a new toy to show you that I'm really excited about.